All right, so we've gotten a very quick, brief look at how the sequencer functions. We're going to make a much better sequence with some cooler sounds after we get a chance to sample some stuff. But before we do that, there's a few settings that I want to take a look at. So I'm going to go back into the project menu, hold function, press project, and here we are. Now there's a ton of different settings in here, and I'm not going to go over all of these. I'm not going to go over a lot of them actually, but I'm going to go over a few that are relevant to us right now. I'm going to go into this area that says control. In the control area, we're able to allocate how the RAM is utilized by the track recorders and also by the flex machines that load different flex samples. I'm going to hit yes for memory, and we see the flex format. Now with the Octatrack, you can play either WAV files or AIF files, and it can be 16-bit or 24-bit. If you're using 24-bit samples, it's going to take up more RAM. If you're recording in a 24-bit format, it's also going to take up more RAM. So typically I like to leave this set to 16-bit. Now I'm going to scroll down. I'll explain dynamic recorders in just a second, but let me scroll down here, and it says reserve recordings R1 through R8. So those are the 8 track recorders that we saw when we talked about the flex machines and how samples are recorded into those track recorders. If you don't need all 8 of these enabled, you can essentially just change this, which will free up the amount of RAM available to the other flex machines. So let's say, for example, maybe you want to sample just one thing and have that on one track in the flex machine, and you want the other flex machines to be able to utilize samples that you've loaded from your memory card. If that's the case, then you don't need all the track recorders, and you can disable the rest to free up more RAM for your other flex machines. I tend to sample a lot, so I want to be able to use all of these. Below that, it says reserve length. The default length of time that the track recorders can record for is 16 seconds. Now, that allows you to have extra RAM left over for your flex machines. So if you record for the full length for each track recorder, if each track recorder records for 16 seconds, you still have a ton of memory available left to load up different samples into your flex machines. Now, if I go up here, it says dynamic recorders. When this is set to no, this means that the track recorders have their 16 seconds of sample time, and that will be left alone. And then your flex machines have the rest of the RAM to utilize, and that's allocated to them. If you want to be able to use the RAM interchangeably, you might want to record samples that are longer than 16 seconds, or maybe you need that extra RAM to load up an especially long sample into a flex machine. We can change this to yes. Now I have more than 16 seconds available to me. If I choose, I can go down to the reserve length, and as I increase this, it's telling us at the top how many steps I would be able to record for if I'm utilizing this amount of sample time, and also how much RAM that the track recorders are going to utilize out of the total amount of RAM. So we see we have 85.5 megabytes of RAM. That's our total amount for the flex machines and the track recorders. So it's important that we allocate it accordingly. Having dynamic recorders set to yes means I don't have to worry about setting a specific amount of reserve length for my track recorders. So I'm just going to leave that alone. If I want to record longer samples, my track recorders have access to all the available RAM. Let me back out of this. I'm going to hit exit. Now I changed some settings. I enabled dynamic recorders, and it's saying playback will be stopped. Unsaved record buffers will be lost. Continue. Thankfully, we hadn't sampled anything yet. Any samples that were recorded and stored in RAM, if I hadn't actually saved those yet, then they would get deleted because we're basically resetting how the track recorders are going to function. So just keep that in mind. This is totally fine for now. I will hit yes. All right. The other thing I wanted to look at is in the system area. So I'm going to go up to system. I move over here, and the option I'm concerned with is personalize. I'm going to hit yes to insert this menu. The top option says quantize live recording, and I have this enabled. I believe by default that this is off. So if you want more of a loose feel, want to preserve more of the human timing, you can just leave that off and then record in real time. I like to have this on, so then everything that I enter will be quantized to the closest sequencer step. Now we can also utilize something called micro timing so that we can shift the steps a little bit ahead or behind. So even if it's quantized, we can still loosen it up a bit. But I'm going to leave that on for now. The other option I'm concerned with here, I'm going to scroll down. Okay, save samples to. By default, when you record something and you save samples, it doesn't save it in the project directory. It saves it in the audio pool. Now, when you record samples into the audio pool, let's say that you have 20 or 30 different projects on your memory card. If all of your samples are just stored in the audio pool, it's going to be hard to associate specific samples with specific projects. There might be a song that you like a lot, and maybe you want to utilize a sample from a specific song in your DAW, or maybe you want to use that in some other project. So storing them in the audio pool can make it kind of difficult to find samples that are linked to specific projects. Because of this, I like to personally save my samples to the project directory. So then anytime I create a new project, when I sample audio, if I save it properly, it gets saved inside of that project folder. That's my preference. One more important option in the Personalize menu, I can't forget about this. Let's go back into here, and if I scroll all the way down, this is going to be especially helpful for us in the next video. It says record quick mode. Now, if this is off, you see these two red buttons up here? These will allow us to record audio that's coming into input A and B or input C and D. If record quick mode is off, you have to hold the track button that you're recording into, as well as press and hold one of these buttons, depending on the record mode. We'll discuss that in the next video. But the point is that it's a two-finger operation if you're not using the record quick mode. I always use record quick mode because it makes the sampling process a lot easier. When this is on, all I have to do is just hold the button for whichever input that I want to record from, and that's it. And it simplifies that process a lot. So make sure that we have record quick mode enabled, and that'll simplify the sampling process. All right, so let me back out of here. Okay, so I think that I'm ready to start sampling some stuff.